Cleopatra's tragic end is one of the most infamous deaths in history. But few people know the shocking truth about what really happened in her final moments. Cleopatra is often portrayed as a royal Egyptian seductress, famous for manipulating powerful men to serve her political agenda. But a closer look at her life reveals that this image may be a misrepresentation. She was intelligent, capable, and very politically savvy. Cleopatra was born around 69 or 70 BC in the great city of Alexandria, a thriving cultural and intellectual center. Her father was King Ptolemy XII, who was so impressed by his daughter's intelligence and capability that shortly before his death, he revised his will to name her joint heir to the throne alongside her brother Ptolemy XIII. This was an unusual position for a woman in ancient Egypt, but Cleopatra's lineage hinted she was destined for greatness. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a family of Greek rulers based in Egypt. The dynasty's founder, Ptolemy I, was a general and close companion of Alexander the Great. After Alexander's death, Ptolemy took control of Egypt and established a new royal line. Cleopatra understood that to become a worthy representative of this powerful dynasty and Egypt's next queen, she would need both education and strategy. Cleopatra spent much of her childhood in the famed Library of Alexandria. Her intellect impressed those around her, and though Greek was her first language, she took it upon herself to learn many more languages, reportedly speaking at least 9 in total. But one language in particular held political significance. Unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra understood the value of speaking directly to her subjects. She became the first Tome ruler to learn Egyptian. She frequently left the palace to travel the country, speaking to ordinary people in their own language. This had far-reaching consequences for her popularity and legacy. Cleopatra's father died in March of 51 BC, and the young princess ascended to the throne at around 19 years old, ruling alongside her brother, Ptolemy XIII. But tensions between the two siblings soon began to rise. Their reign got off to a rocky start. Their father had left behind massive debts to the Roman Republic, and, to make matters worse, the Nile did not flood as much as normally that year. This caused a severe drought, which led to famine across the region. But Cleopatra rose to meet the crisis head-on. She took an active role in addressing the food shortages, ordering royal granaries to distribute food to the starving population. This made her immensely popular with the people. It was the beginning of a series of policies that would define her reign. But her growing popularity did not sit well with everyone at the time. Egypt was a diverse and multicultural kingdom. As both queen and chief religious authority, Cleopatra oversaw the construction of temples for both Greek and Egyptian gods, and even commissioned a synagogue for Egypt's Jewish community. But her growing popularity among the masses increased tensions within the royal household. By August 29, 51 BC, official documents began to list Cleopatra as the sole ruler of Egypt, suggesting a major rift between her and Ptolemy XIII. This rift would soon have political consequences. Before long, civil war erupted between the siblings and their rival factions. What they needed was a powerful mediator, and they got the most powerful one in the world. Cleopatra's conflict with her brother devastated the region, and it didn't take long for the chaos to attract the attention of none other than Julius Caesar himself. Caesar called on both Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII to disband their armies and make peace. But Ptolemy refused, and Cleopatra saw an opportunity. Ignoring Caesar's request, Ptolemy XIII marched on Alexandria. Cleopatra tried sending envoys to plead her case, but they got her nowhere. Then she heard something intriguing. Caesar had a soft spot for royal women, so Cleopatra hatched a bold plan and slipped into Alexandria under the cover of night. Without her brother's knowledge, Cleopatra managed to arrange a secret meeting with Caesar. One version of the story even claims she smuggled herself into his palace, rolled up in a carpet. Dressed to impress, and known for her sharp wit, Cleopatra managed to charm Caesar. Whatever happened in the meeting, it worked. Soon after, Tommy XIII found out Cleopatra was meeting with Caesar and panicked. But Caesar, referencing the will of their late father, declared before the Alexandrian ruling council that the two siblings must end their feud and rule together once again. Tony XIII wasn't having it. He feared, probably rightly, that with Caesar on her side, Cleopatra would gain the upper hand. Confident in the size of his army, which outnumbered Caesar's, he made a bold decision. Attack. That choice kicked off a brutal siege of Alexandria that dragged on into the following year. Cleopatra stayed with Caesar in his palace during the siege, and the two grew closer. Caesar backed Cleopatra, and the pair made plans to defeat her brother once and for all. By March of 47 BC, Caesar's reinforcements finally arrived. With his bolstered army, Caesar pushed Tommy XIII's forces into retreat. Trying to flee down the Nile, Tommy's ship was pursued and eventually capsized by Roman troops. Tommy XIII drowned, and Cleopatra's path to the throne was clear. Still, Caesar had one more political move to make. Wary of the backlash from naming a sole female ruler, he appointed Cleopatra as co-ruler once again, this time with her 12-year-old brother, Tommy XIV. Cleopatra didn't seem to mind. The boy was really more of a figurehead while she held the real power. But Cleopatra didn't rush home. By then, it was clear that she and Caesar were not just political allies. They were having an affair, a power couple for the ages. Instead of heading back to the capital, the pair reportedly took a leisurely cruise down the Nile. Historians debate whether the trip actually happened, but it would have made sense. Caesar was famously fascinated by geography and obsessed with discovering the source of the Nile. According to some accounts, they traveled aboard Theos, a luxurious barge originally built by Cleopatra's ancestor, Tommy XIV. This floating palace was enormous, 300 ft long and 80 ft tall, with dining rooms, shrines, promenades, and grand state rooms. Interestingly, Cleopatra was the only Ptolemaic ruler to put her face on coins. Caesar did the same, and he was the first Roman ruler to do so. More than likely, Cleopatra had inspired him. Together, they started a global trend that lasted for centuries. There was something else they shared. During the Civil War, Cleopatra hadn't made many public appearances. Strange for someone known for connecting with the people. Many believed it was because she was pregnant. On June 23, 47 BC, she gave birth to a son, Caesarion, who she declared was Caesar's child. Cleopatra made no secret of her son's parentage, officially naming Caesar as the father. Caesar, however, never publicly acknowledged the boy, likely because he was already married in Rome, but some believe he may have done so privately. Eventually, though, Caesar had to return home. In late 46 BC, Cleopatra traveled to Rome to visit him, bringing along her young brother and co-ruler. She even stayed in Caesar's lavish villa. For Cleopatra and Caesar, it was a final moment of peace before everything changed. Tensions were already running high in the Roman Republic, and Cleopatra's presence in Rome didn't exactly help. She welcomed a steady stream of official visitors to Caesar's villa. But not everyone was charmed by the Egyptian queen. One particularly vocal critic was the famous Senator Cicero, who found Cleopatra arrogant and off-putting. But Cicero's opinion of her would soon become the least of her problems. On March 1544 BC, the infamous Ides of March, Julius Caesar was assassinated in the Roman Senate. Suddenly, Cleopatra's position became extremely precarious. Hoping to secure a future for her son, Caesarion, Cleopatra stayed in Rome and pushed to have him recognized as Caesar's legitimate heir. But her campaign failed. Caesar's grandnephew, Octavian, was named his official successor. Still, Cleopatra may have used this moment of chaos to assert her power. Not long after Caesar's death, Cleopatra's younger brother and co-ruler, Ptolemy the XIV, died unexpectedly. The cause of death was never confirmed, but rumors swirled that Cleopatra herself had poisoned the boy. Whatever the truth, Ptolemy XIV's sudden death cleared the way for Cleopatra to solidify her hold and power in Egypt. Cleopatra knew that to maintain her legitimacy, she still needed a male co-ruler. Her choice was obvious. She named her son Caesarion as her new co-ruler. It was a savvy political move that solidified her grip during an increasingly volatile time. After Caesar's assassination, Rome plunged into chaos. The second triumvirate, composed of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus, took charge, sparking a civil war against the men who assassinated Caesar. Cleopatra, ever cautious, threw her support behind the triumvirate, but she wasn't eager to commit to their cause too much. Both sides of the conflict appealed to her for military aid. Cleopatra mostly ignored the pleas from Caesar's assassins, but even with the triumvirate, she dragged her feet, only sending troops once the worst of the fighting had passed. She was careful not to weaken her own forces. Despite her hesitation, the triumvirate advanced. Mark Antony emerged as the most powerful figure in the Eastern Roman Empire, and soon he summoned Cleopatra to meet him. While their meeting was politically necessary, Antony clearly had personal motives as well. He wasn't just after a political alliance. Cleopatra obliged, but she was strategic about it. She hosted Antony aboard her luxurious barge for 2 nights of feasting and celebration. It was glamorous, seductive, and highly calculated. Cleopatra knew exactly what she was doing. To her, Antony wasn't just a potential partner. After Caesar, Antony was the most influential Roman, and Cleopatra recognized the opportunity. She began an affair with Mark Antony, not just out of passion, but with the goal of holding on to her power. Their relationship was famously intense. By the end of 40 BC, less than 2 years after their first meeting, Cleopatra had given birth to 3 of Antony's children, twin boys and a daughter. Unlike Caesar, Antony publicly acknowledged the children as his own. He really didn't have a choice. Cleopatra held all the cards. Antony needed her badly. Despite his victories, his army was in shambles, and Cleopatra came to the rescue. She provided him with 200 ships for his next campaign, essentially becoming his military sponsor. Antony's conquests allowed him to reclaim lands surrounding Egypt, and under Cleopatra's influence, he handed them over to her and her children, a move known as the Donations of Alexandria. It was a major win for Cleopatra, and she wasn't shy about celebrating it. She staged a grand ceremony to announce her triumph. Dressed as the goddess Isis, she declared herself Queen of Kings and named Caesarion King of Kings. It was a bold statement, and Rome didn't take it lightly, especially Octavian, who was furious. He publicly criticized Antony for his alliance with Cleopatra and accused him of betraying Roman interests. Their partnership began to fall apart. Octavian also launched a full-blown propaganda war against Cleopatra. He accused her of using witchcraft to seduce Antony and corrupt Roman values. He painted her as a foreign threat to civilization itself. One popular rumor claimed Cleopatra dissolved a priceless pearl in vinegar just to win a bet, proof, supposedly, of her extravagance and disdain for Roman virtue. But Cleopatra didn't go down without a fight. She pushed back against the smear campaign, trying to protect her reputation and her kingdom from the rising tide of Roman hostility. Cleopatra and Antony were under growing pressure as the conflict continued. But Cleopatra wasn't one to back down. On September 2nd, 34 BC, the huge naval battle known as the Battle of Actium took place. Cleopatra personally commanded 60 ships herself, right in the thick of the action aboard her flagship, the Antonius. A bold move, especially for a woman back then. She fought fiercely, though her approach to diplomacy was just as bold. Despite their determination, Cleopatra and Antony's forces were beginning to falter. They sought allies wherever they could by any means necessary. One unconfirmed story claims that Cleopatra, trying to win the support of one ally, sent him the head of his rival. Whether true or not, the alliance didn't change their fortunes. By 31 BC, things were going so badly that Cleopatra began to see Antony as more of a liability than an asset. She started preparing to leave Egypt to her son Caesarion, and made plans to escape to India, where she hoped to find refuge and recover. But those hopes were dashed when one of Octavian's generals burned her entire fleet. With no clear path forward, she had to consider more desperate options. Feeling increasingly trapped, Cleopatra believed she might have to take the only route left. Some reports, possibly Octavian's propaganda, claimed she began testing different poisons on prisoners and servants to find the most merciful one, in case she needed to use it on herself. As grim as it sounded, it wasn't an unreasonable outcome. By August of 30th BC, Octavian's forces were completely dominating. Antony's armies, cavalries, and fleets surrendered one by one. He retreated to his palace in Alexandria, with Cleopatra waiting for the inevitable. Worried that Antony had become a dangerous liability, Cleopatra launched one final deception. She locked herself in her tomb and had her servants send word that she had died. Shortly after Mark Antony died, Octavian entered Alexandria, took control of the palace, and seized Cleopatra's 3 youngest children. He offered her safety under Roman custody, but a spy warned her that Octavian planned to take her to Rome and parade her as a war trophy. Determined to avoid such humiliation, Cleopatra made her final move. On August 10th, 30th of BC, Cleopatra took poison along with her most loyal servants. Some sources say they volunteered. The great pharaoh queen died at 39, likely in her palace, or perhaps even in her tomb, depending on which account you believe. No one knows exactly how Cleopatra died, but speculation ran wild. However it happened, her death marked the end of her dynasty. After Cleopatra's death, Caesarion fled to Upper Egypt, but Octavian lured him back to Alexandria with false promises that he could rule. Instead, the boy was executed. This brought the Hellenistic period in Egypt to a close, making Cleopatra the last active Hellenistic pharaoh. With Cleopatra gone, Egypt became a Roman province under Octavian's control. He renamed himself Augustus and became the first emperor of Rome, amassing sweeping constitutional powers. Yet, Cleopatra was the one who would be remembered far more vividly. Almost 2,000 years later, Cleopatra became a pop culture icon. During the Egyptomania craze that swept through the Western world in Victorian Britain, she fascinated the public. Her image appeared on everything from lithographs and postcards to oil lamps and cigarette boxes. But many of these depictions weren't accurate. Today, Cleopatra is often remembered as a stunning and cunning seductress, irresistible to men, a portrayal pushed by countless films and books. But this doesn't match the historical record. In truth, she only had 2 known lovers, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Few ancient sources talk about her physical beauty. Most praised her charm, intelligence, and wit. So, while history and pop culture often focus on her love life, they miss the bigger picture. Cleopatra was a brilliant, bold woman who spoke multiple languages, hosted lavish events, went hunting and into battle, and shook the very foundations of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to Keep Exploring with Us. Don't forget to visit our main page, FactNate, for more incredible facts about everything.